Wilkinson here. Thanks for joining us again today. It would really help me a lot if you did a couple things if you're enjoying these episodes. First of all, hit that subscribe button below. It really helps me out. Secondly, if you are enjoying the podcast, hit that like button. That's a little thumbs up down there. Leave a comment. Let me know which episodes you like, and I'll try to do more like that. Thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Wilkinson here. I am back with my friend Mel England. And on our first episode, we talked about his personal side. And this time we're going to talk about his professional side. So again, say hi to everybody like you did last time.
Hi there. I'm back.
We're so glad to have you. Let's see. Where should we pick up? You want to be in New York, or where do you want to be?
Well, I guess New York makes sense. I mean,
Okay.
that's sort of where we left off.
Okay.
So guess we start where? Like I barely survived AIDS, and then
Right.
boom.
Okay.
You know what happened was I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah, I was I was getting sober in AA.
Right. You had said, yeah, you did that.
And so what happened was after a couple of, I immediately was like, oh my God, I was an actor. Wait, what's happening? Like, and I did.
Where are you location wise at this point when you're realizing that? Are you in Texas again? Or
No, I was in New York.
You're still in New York.
I'm in New York.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I was getting sober in New York, which is kind of an amazing place to get sober. And anyway, there was a good friend of mine who I had actually studied at Stella Adler with. He was doing a play on Broadway. And I went up to Sean. I was like, Sean, oh my God, I've got to, I don't know what to do. I've got to get work and I've got to make it happen. And he just, I just sort of was a ball of,
Blah.
crazy energy.
Yeah.
And Sean just looked at me, he said, just get sober first. And I was like, oh, okay. And
Wow.
it was really exactly what he needed to say, because I really did need to focus on that. Because in a way, people take it too casually. I'll just say that. Like you can set your... And also, I just wanted to get better. I had a lifetime of trauma and drama and
Right.
insanity and all of the trauma around HIV, AIDS, and, the sexual abuse, all of that I really needed to look at. And if I was going to stay on the planet and stay 6 feet above ground, I needed to really deal with it. So I, was in therapy and recovery, and I went to recovery for like everything. I was just like, I wanted, to deal with relationships and money, and like I just worked and sexual, abuse survivor stuff, and I did everything I could because
You jumped in the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, deep end. And I had people that were encouraging me.
Right.
I mean, I had a friend who basically, because I was, having problems with money and stuff, and she just looked at me, and she had been sober for a long time. She was a Broadway actress, actually, too. She from way back when in the 70s. And she just said, you're never going to get better if you don't go deal with your sexual abuse. So I really had to go deal with all that stuff. And in a weird way, you just learn how to live with it. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. You get sober but it's not like it all resolves in a pretty package. Right. Like this stuff is your life, like that right. stuff that happened. About a couple of years sober, I was like, okay, I started to go back to class, and I went to Terry Schreiber's studio, and Terry Schreiber is just sort of this amazing acting teacher in New York City. And I just knew I needed to kind of just start from square one. And I'm so glad I did that, because he is, besides being this incredible acting teacher, it just provided this really safe space for me to incorporate what I had been learning about myself into the work. So I was able to actually do the kind of work that I, had always wanted to do. And that was the beginning of a process, and I started, doing some theater in New York again. And at some point, Terry, actually, when I was finishing with him after a couple of years, he suggested that I do this workshop. And there was a couple that was coming in to his studio, Miranda and Jana Saunders, who were doing this sort of like life coaching, I guess is the way I could put it.
Okay.
But it's sort of deep, work where you look at whatever your subconscious blocks are. And so I went and I did their workshop weekend. And I came out of it, and all I can say is that I that's kind of when I started seeing myself start to do things that I had been afraid of. And one of them was, at some point, I wanted to come out to LA. So took the bull by the horns and I came out for pilot season and I stayed on my friend's couch. Same friend that had been in Boulder, Colorado, actually. She was like, "Duh, just stay on my couch." And within a few months,
she kept the crystals though, right?
Yeah, she did keep it. She's the same person.
Just want to make sure.
She's actually a minister of an agape church. So she's doing the Science of Mind thing, and she's in there.
All right.
So, I came out to LA and kind of on a whim in a way, but also I just knew that if I didn't do it, I can't remember how old I was, but it was in my 30s. And I just thought, if I don't do this now, I'll always regret it. Right. So I came out, I'm sitting on a couch. Eventually I bought a car, I got an apartment, and I was just about to give up. I was just about to go, I don't know about this. And that's when I got cast in Little Big Top. And that was my first feature film that, ended up, it was an indie film, but
it was not a porn one. Even
no, it sounds like a porn name. I know. All the gay guys go, "What?" No, what? Not that, kids. No, it's about a circus. So because I had one of the leads, I got, the agent basically negotiated that I got fourth billing. And so when the film got distribution, and ended up.
What is fourth billing? Does that mean like you're on the credits?
Yeah,
and
when the opening credits, and you get Sid Haig was the star, and then there were a couple of other Richard Reel, who's a really famous character actor, Hollis Resnick, who was another big actor from Chicago, who. And then my name, and I was like on the screen in a separate title, this is for me.
So this is like the first time you saw your name up there, right?
In that way, in a film that ended up getting distribution, and then it was on Netflix for 10 years.
Wow! So
it ended up being like a big deal for me in that way, and put me on the map. I didn't even really comprehend. I had a friend who had to explain to me that, people had come out to LA and try all their lives.
Right. And this is a big deal. You got this.
Yeah. Kind of like, wow, just take a look at what's happening. Right. And so I'm deeply grateful. I'm deeply grateful every day that passes by that I've gotten to work, that I keep working, that I've gotten to now make movies. And theater is something that I've done ever since I'm a little boy, as you know, because I talked about that last time. But it just that I've gotten to keep working has been a really big, it's like the bonus prize because, I kind of lost my 20s in a way to AIDS, HIV. Right. And even though I did keep working at that time, I was doing little things in New York, but it was, I just never thought I would be able to. Like I said, I had run away from New York, thought I'd never be an actor, I'd be dead. So the fact that I actually get to do this, not only that I get to live, but then I actually get to do what I want to do, it's incredible. Yeah, I just kept making movies. It kind of haphazardly. I ended up, I remember I came back from I think it was a film festival, and where Little Big Top was. And I came back into LA and I realized, I guess I need to start auditioning again. I just didn't realize, I didn't really know what to do. And that's when it occurred to me, this is 2005 or 6 or something, and I think it was 2006. And I realized that all the big A-listers were also producing their own things. And I had actually done that in New York as a stage actor.
Right.
If I wasn't cast in something, I would pull my friends together and we do a showcase or something. So I was like, oh, you know what? So I decided I wanted to develop some projects of my own. So I think I ended up having a reading of a script that I had written, and friend Craig Chester, who's the filmmaker, actor from Adam and Steve, and he'd won Independent Spirit Award in the 90s, or no, I'm sorry, he got a nomination for his performance in Swoon. But he set me up with Sally Kirkland to read the script, Oscar nominee, Golden Globe actress. And so we did this reading, and suddenly I was developing and producing my own works. And so I ended up doing my solo shows Off-Broadway. I had a great manager, Jessica Patel, who really helped put that together. That solo show, Swimming the Polar Bears, I ended up taking because it had an environmental theme. And also, I told my HIV/AIDS story in that. And so I got invited to the UN Summit on Climate Change, We had a benefit for Al Gore's climate projects. He signed my posters. I have like my face with Al Gore writing his name on it. Ended up developing another film, Ron and Laura Take Back America. I've had
What's
this
that
life.
about?
Ron and Laura Take Back America was actually pre-Trump, but it was back in the Tea Party era and into the Obama years, a Tea Party couple trying to take their country back. And it was sort of a mockumentary.
Right.
And so this couple decides to make a documentary in the film about their activism. And so you sort of see them in all these, now we would, it's funny. It's a comedy, but it was a very painful, dark comedy because it's like they're against gays, but their son is gay. They're against, illegals, quote unquote illegals, but
except when they're working for them.
except they have an undocumented, lady take care of their mother.
Right.
The mother needs to get into the nursing home, but she's in the donut hole. So they really need like Obamacare, but they're against Obamacare. It's all that stuff. And so anyway, we made the film and we hit the film festival circuit and that got all these nominations and awards and that was great and was distributed. And working on another film right now with the filmmaker Billy Clift. It's a film about interracial gay couple that is sort of contending with racism and xenophobia in the landscape of America and where we are today. And the film is called Here We Are. And so we're expecting that in the fall. So I've been busy.
You'll start shooting in the fall?
No. We've wrapped up
you have?
shooting. We're just in what's called post-production.
Post-production, right. Now you were in other films. I told you about one I really liked that you were in.
Best Day Ever.
Yeah. I've watched that multiple times actually, and I don't usually do that.
It is interesting. There is definitely a place for the people that movie has a real heart to it, and I'm very proud of that film. And one of the things that I love about the film, Jeff London, the filmmaker, makes movies specifically about small town gays. So he's not, like his films are not about San Francisco, New York, LA. It's about people living in it's a different kind of a culture. They're not the same kind of, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say like big city, small, It's not that. It's just that people who live in more smaller communities have a whole other set of things they have to deal with. You may not have a huge you may have to be your own LGBTQ center.
So for my listeners, just briefly, what is that movie about?
Best Day Ever is about a May-December romance, as they would say. My character's turning 50 and having a midlife crisis. And I end up meeting a man in his 20s. And we fall in love, but my character kind of can't accept that he should be falling in love with somebody who's so much younger and he's so much older and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really a love story, but it's also about accepting ourselves. And I think in a way, knowing that we deserve to have love. Right. I think that's why it speaks to people, because people feel like everybody,
I thought it was very hopeful. That's what I took away on it.
It is hopeful.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I think the point of the film is it's never too late. But I think, especially in the gay community, it gets very difficult for people. And, when
I was watching that movie, I always kind of hoped that you would smack that boyfriend character of yours.
Oh, the ex-boyfriend. Yeah.
Who turns out to be the ex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's a nicer person in real life.
Oh, in real life.
I really did not like him in the movie.
In a real life, he's a sweetheart. And he's actually, that's Nate Moore, and he's an amazing actor. Juilliard.
He played the part well.
Yeah. And he's not bad to look at. So there's that. He's a sweetheart, great guy. And I just adore it. And then Peter Stickles, who's sort of a gay indie cinema icon, was in the film Short Bus and a bunch of other things. The Lair on Here TV and all these things. But Peter Stickles plays my best friend and sort of sets me up.
He's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so Peter.
Well, wait a minute. So the old man and your buddy, is he the one that made the film? He's not. Isn't his name London or something like that?
Oh, wait. Yeah. So, okay. It's interesting. I'm so glad you asked, because we can now talk about Ace. So Ace London is the actor who played the mentor to my character, but he's also really playing himself because he was a mentor in a way to Jeff, the filmmaker, and the story is autobiographical. So I'm really in a way playing a version of Jeff.
Really?
And so Ace is playing himself in the film, and Ace...
Are they related, those two?
No, Ace was just sort of the father figure.
Right.
He's like like he's in the small town, he's like the older gay guy that's like, helping everybody out. Right. And so oddly enough, Ace ended up befriending me, and he had this like insane life in Hollywood in the 60s and even before that, but he had been a publicist to like Mahalia Jackson and Jane Mansfield.
Oh, really?
And then he had been married to a woman and then came out. In the late 60s, he had a lover, Patrick, who ended up dying of AIDS. And then he chronicled all of it in an autobiography. I forgot the exact title. I think it's called Everyone's Coming Out of the Closet and Into the Dining Room or something like that. It was sort of like this, fun title. But Ace was actually, speaking of like in the last episode, we were talking about the history of journalism. He actually ended up being an early journalist for the gay community. So he worked for a little newspaper in Santa Monica, I think in the 70s. Right. Then he ended up having radio shows that he did for years. And
is he a singer too?
He also sang.
I think he sang a song on there, didn't he?
He sang a song in the movie. That's correct. Okay. He's a crooner. Right. And so Ace was a real important person. We actually, this organization I was talking about in the last episode, the Lavender Effect, which I'm, LGBTQ history organization. We actually sort of, when Ace passed away a few years ago, we were able to capture a lot of Ace's archives and kind of get them into, a proper archive. So I'm very proud of that because Ace had a really important story in that kind of small town. When I mean small town way, what I mean is that he was not like a bold-faced name, but he was a very critical player in sort of not only coming out at a time when people were just starting to come out in the late 60s, early 70s, and then his boyfriend died of AIDS. He was one of the first people to be gay married by Troy Perry.
Really?
Troy Perry was MCC Church in Hollywood. They were gay married in the 70s. I mean, if you think about that, like that's kind of insane. So that's why we had to kind of get his stuff into the archives. So, I take it all very personally and passionately, like I feel like the work becomes an extension of our lives,
Well, we have to bring up electricity.
Oh, speaking of the work becoming our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Electricity.
What was that?
So Electricity is a play that I've been doing for literally the last 5 years. It started in Los Angeles. I did not start with it. I just saw it. And my friend Terry Ray had written...
Who's been on here before. I've interviewed him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Terry. So Terry wrote the play, and he did it in Los Angeles with Steve Rosenbaum, the director, and Kevin Scott Allen played the other character. And I saw it, and I just loved his play. And I was like, oh my, because it's the story of two gay guys who go from hook up in a hotel room and right after their first high school reunion, their 10-year high school reunion in 1983. And then you see them every decade in the same hotel room after their high school reunion, 83, 93, 2003, 2013. And it literally documents the story of the generation that went from the closet to equality. And you see everything because effectively these two characters go through it. And so one of the reasons the play has been going, they moved it to Palm Springs and Kevin couldn't come, so I replaced him. And it's just had this life because gay men identify with the play so much because it is the journey of this generation.
Right. Well, especially in Palm Springs. Well, because, they're not all 20-year-olds here.
Well, right. And the thing is that oddly enough, when we first started doing it here, we're talking about, these conversations about marketing and our demographic. And so, yeah, certainly the audience would seem to be gay men of, 40 and up or something. And what's happened is that we found out that the Gen Zs and the millennials, and when they come and see the show, they are like, and I'm not even joking, like they're like, thank you so much for telling our story, and they have an ownership of it. And when the first time, it was a young lesbian that said that, I was like, whoa, like, and then I realized, oh, that's how I feel about when I see footage of the 60s and civil rights stuff that happened before I was born.
Right.
I go, oh, that there's an ownership because it's their story. So they've been very impassioned about it. And then because the story is also a love story, oddly enough, straight people come and say, this isn't even a gay play. It's just a story about a relationship. So it actually has a very broad appeal. We started doing it in Palm Springs, and in the same time, I would have like friends from, I had some friends from New York that came to see the play. And this was early on. And my friends were like, oh, you guys should bring this to New York. And I just thought they were being, my
courteous,
friends. And then what happened is every time New Yorkers came, people come to Palm Springs from all over the place.
Right.
And every time New Yorkers came, they'd say that. And finally, I listened to it and I started talking to Terry about it and Michael, our producer. And I was like, we should try that. So we finally, I think it was in 2018, we took the play to New York to do what's called a backers audition. And I happened to have 5 Broadway producers there that night. I mean, which that in and of itself, I was just pinching myself. Like I'd been waiting my whole life for that. They were all interested right away, like every single one of them. So we began the process of building the team to take the play off Broadway. And then, of course, COVID happened. In the meantime, we were touring. We went to Minneapolis, where we won one of the best productions of the year next to Hamilton. I actually won Best Actor next to Richard Thomas from, the Waltons. And I was a huge Broadway star, actually. Then we did the play, went to Columbus. Back to LA. We went to New York for the 50th anniversary of Stonewall for some special performances. So we've toured and we've been all over, and we are going to New York. We're still in the process of building the team. We had to take a pause, then we came back to Palm Springs last year, post-COVID, or not post-COVID, but whatever this is we're in.
Whatever.
Yeah. And
normal COVID.
So then we actually did it again this last year, and we won some more awards. So that's been great. Terry won Best Original Play, and I won Best Actor again in the Coachella Valley. I know, which for me is like not really about, I have a weird relationship with what it means is that it gives you more validation for this, for other people to go, oh, I should see this. So it's an honor to be nominated. It's an honor if you win. It's an honor if you don't even get nominated and you don't win, because anytime you get to do something, it's just a great thing. But the show has legs, so we're taking it to New York. And
do you have dates or anything on that?
Not yet, because we're still in the process of we have more. Basically you get investors, and so we're still raising some of the capital. Also, what's happened in New York is that the environment right now is really complicated because the theater really took a hit. So
they pretty well shut everything down, didn't they, during COVID?
Well, during COVID, everything shut down. But then last year when things came back, it's not the same. And, Broadway and Off-Broadway had been on fire before COVID. I mean, it had been just for plays. I had never seen it like this. I'd go back into the city and, there would be 10 plays off Broadway. I mean, because there's more musicals on Broadway. Right. I had never seen it like that. So many plays. So we were very optimistic. We're still optimistic because there's a few reasons. It's one of the cheapest plays you can do because it's 2 actors in one set. And also we have a built-in audience, and that's of course the LGBTQ audience. And it's also the audience that's not afraid to go to the theater. There's just there's a lot of factors.
Right.
So we feel really good about it. We're actually headed to New York in March to do another backers audition. We've just hired a general manager, and that's the person who sort of helps secure the theater and do this. Right. So it's all working.
You're coming back to Palm Springs for a couple.
We are.
Yeah.
We're going to do a couple of performances of the play and a special benefit performance February 10th and 11th for the Bent Theater, which is
the new one just starting.
The new LGBTQ theater company that Terry Ray and our director Steve Rosenbaum are starting. So I'm really happy to do Electricity as a fundraiser for them because we need to have an LGBTQ focused theater company in Palm Springs, and I'm just glad that they're doing that.
Right. And that's going to be at the Camelot, correct?
Well, Camelot / now they call it the Palm Springs Cultural Center. Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
And so I think the ticket sites might be up already.
Okay. I definitely want to see it because I missed it the first time.
People can go to electricitytheplay.com and it'll be right there. So yeah, I can't wait for you to see it because it's been, for me, it's also oddly enough, like it's like an actor's dream, like to be able to do a play for this long. I mean, we've certainly taken breaks, here and there, but we've become the longest running play in Palm Springs. But it's also like, for 5 years, I think it's 5 years. Yeah. The whole time my dad lived with me. My dad came to live with us and had Alzheimer's. We didn't quite know it yet, but literally the same month that I went into rehearsals for Electricity. So it's sort of the whole journey of the play in Palm Springs has tracked along with my dad. Then he passed away. And at the same time, we're beginning the process of leaving to go to New York. I'm not leaving Palm Springs, we have a place here, but...
Were you living here when your dad was with you, or was that in LA or what?
We actually, when my dad came to live with me, we lived in LA.
Okay.
And I was commuting here for a few years. We moved here literally a month before the pandemic. Or it was January of 2020, 2 months before.
I think a lot of people came then. I've talked to so many people on here, and that's when they arrived.
I didn't expect it, but I'm so glad we were here during the pandemic because it was. I'm glad we weren't in Los Angeles because and I'm glad I was in the city. Listen, the first couple of months of the pandemic, I knew 6 people that died.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was. I was
Was
really,
that in New York?
In New York City, because it was. You remember?
Well, that was ground zero.
And nobody understood what was going on. And like one of my friends was one of the nurses that when they were fighting for PPE, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And he was in the ER and he ended up on the national news. He had been my roommate's boyfriend and he'd been in my apartment many times, James Caios. And
he passed.
Yeah, he did. Like it was shocking, horrible. And that's when this whole like, oh, wait, we've been through this before thing kicked in. It's been a trip, but God willing, we'll be in New York in the fall. And I'm really excited about the play. I hope people get a chance to see it.
Well, I definitely will. But we haven't talked about one thing that I'm going to ask you about. So Tony, where'd you meet him?
Tony. So my husband, we just celebrated 15 years together.
Again, I'm congratulating you a lot.
Thank you. Well, I'll take it because they're all, like I said, when you thought you were going to be dead, it's like, great. I got a speeding ticket. Yay. Like it doesn't, nothing, it's all good.
Doesn't faze you.
Yeah. Well, it does faze me.
Right.
But then I rember.
You can put it in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony and I met 15 years ago. He's actually sober too. So we met through sort of, some mutual acquaintances and, it was kind of one of the, I guess you could say it was love at first sight kind of thing. I was very smitten and I asked him if he wanted to go out for coffee. We actually had like a dinner with friends at one point. I think we were in a California pizza chicken place or whatever that was. You know how the legs get a little too close and, I walked him like to his car.
So he was sitting next to you at the dinner?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so there was definitely some electricity there. And, yeah, we just started dating. But, it was funny because I was on my way back to New York because I had been for couple of years at that point. I was, 6 months in New York, 6 months in, I'd go back to an off-Broadway play. I'd come out to LA, then maybe do a movie. And, I was just back and forth. And so I was like, I can't really get into a relationship right now. I'm not available. I'm going back to New York. And, I just want to warn you. And then he'd look at me and he'd say, okay. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, then what are you doing later? Like it just kind of.
Did he mean, okay, I can handle that, or okay, You'll figure it out.
Well, probably the second.
Right.
But I think he would, later I found out that because Tony was, he's a designer, he does interior design, and, he also sells like modern furniture. But he was working at this store at the time in LA called Blueprint, which is sort of this go-to place for people. And anyway, at some point he explained to me this thing called the takeaway in sales, where, if people want something or they're not sure, well, that's the last one we got. Like this kind of takeaway thing. And so I realized in a weird way he was doing the takeaway with me. It was like, I was like, no, I can't do this. It's fine. Okay. As opposed to fighting me on it or trying to trap me. And I think in a way that's exactly, I was so, because of my history as somebody, it took me a long time in recovery. I mean, I was 10 years in at that point to be in a place where I could even maybe be ready to be in a relationship with somebody. When you have trauma of any kind, but specifically like even physical, sexual, any kind of abuse that happened, it can be very complicated. And so for me to be in a place where I could actually even begin, I mean, I dated people and stuff like that, but I had been the king of sabotage, run away, suffocate, abandon, like just all the things you do. I didn't know. I'd never really been ready. Oddly enough, what we found out was both of our mothers, my birth mother had passed away the year before, and his birth mother, he was also adopted by an American family. He's from Vietnam. It's a whole other story. But his birth mother had passed away the year before. And in a weird way, I don't know how else to put it, except to say that I think we were both ready. And I don't think that, I don't think it's like a switch you can turn on. I think it's like there's something, because I'd been single my whole adult life.
Really?
And I had thought, I dated or had romances or 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever. But I'd never lived with anybody. But I had reasons. Never mind. I mean, until I got sober, I wasn't even really aware that I'd been sexually abused. I thought that like it was just my first boyfriend, which was a really complicated thing to figure out. And then I was like, oh gosh, so no wonder I have trouble with relationships, because there'd also been physical violence involved. I thought like, you don't know this until you know it. But like years later, I was like, oh, I had this relationship with, if I was sexual with somebody, then it suddenly became a kill or be killed situation. Like when that kind of programming is deeply embedded in you, you're never going to stick around. I mean, I was just like not going to trust anybody. So when you start to do the work to find this stuff out, I was like, okay, well now I know it. Now what am I going to do? And so you kind of go through this whole like part of your life where you're like, so I had really made peace that I was never going to be in a relationship. I was like, okay, I'll be fine. I'll just date when I date. And then I met Tony. And I think we were both just in a place where we were ready, He
seems like a pretty cool guy. And I met him at the Lincoln debate after party.
So, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about Tony is also that we shared so much in common, even though, we both had this. I had a very different experience because I had an adopted mother, and she actually sort of like saved my life in a way. But my birth mother, because I'd been separated from her, there was this longing and this desire and this confusion. And Tony had that same experience being born in Vietnam and his mother having to give him up. His situation with adoption was, bad, but we had these similar things. So in a way, actually, when I met Tony, I was like, oh, thank God somebody has a story worse than mine.
Oh my.
So, it's been a wonderful thing. I have lots of friends who ask me, like, I see my friends, so many of, most of my gay friends are single. It's so hard. And I remember, and I feel like part of the magic of what happened, sure, I was attracted to Tony, absolutely. But I also think that I had gotten myself into a place, much like the story in that film, And Best Day Ever, where I had to realize, it's almost like you really have to put wanting to be in a relationship actually in first position. And what I mean is that it's
without being desperate.
Well, there's that. Yeah,
right.
Of course.
But
no,
without
the desperation is actually a way to push people away.
Right.
And you just, like, that's what I realized before I got ready was I was like, oh, I've actually been, like, I would always think that they were the unavailable ones.
Right.
And then finally one day it occurred to me, oh, I think I'm the unavailable one because I'm picking all the unavailable ones.
Right.
So when you finally get through all your mind traps, you kind of, I just think you have to start looking for people. I always think of, like, back to the Catholicism thing, but like growing,
which is another topic. We talked about that one before we started the podcast.
Well,
so that's another show.
Back in Texas, I
Right.
would always see, like, in my very Tex-Mex grandmothers, would have the calendars from Dallas Tortilla Factory.
Right.
And they'd have, like, Jesus with this, the heart is open, sort of like on fire, and, but you see his heart. And I always talk about that because I'm like, when you're going to be with somebody, it's like your heart is literally exposed. You want somebody who you feel safe that they can actually touch your heart. And that is the thing, I think we look for sex, or we look for this romantic thing that turns it into some kind of fantasy. And I just had actually a really good piece of advice from the same lady I was telling you about in the last episode. Or no, I think we were talking about it earlier. But
Is she the crystal lady?
No, my psychic friend.
Oh, the psychic.
She's psychic, and she also sort of is a love and relationship expert. She's all sorts of things. But anyway, Jane had told me when I was early on trying to learn how to date, in therapy, in recovery, all this stuff. And she was like, the problem is you can't think from, like, sex addiction place. Like, in other words, like, are they hot?
Right.
And then you can't also act out of this love, like, romance addiction place. Like, I want to have this fantasy relationship with this person who's going to make me feel, good inside. And she's like, you just want to ask people out on dates. And what is a date? And I was like, I don't know. Like, what is a date? Going to the movie? She said, it's a platonic adventure with a friend. Okay, right. What does that mean? She's like, well, what are we doing right now? I was like, having coffee. And she said, so this counts. This is a date.
No pressure.
That's how you have to think about it, because you want to develop a friendship with somebody that's so beautiful, so intimate that, you want to be with that person. Because sex and romance are beautiful things, but they can be fleeting and they can come and go. But a loving relationship is something that you have to deeply cultivate. So I've learned, still learning. We've been together for 15 years.
What do you like best about him?
Oh, he's such a good person. Like, he's so thoughtful and caring. And I mean, he's not bad to look at. That doesn't hurt. But he's really one of the most nurturing people I've ever known, because he deeply cares about making people feel good. One day I was actually taking photos with this photographer who's also a friend, and Tony came along to just help with the clothes or whatever. And she looked at his watch. She's like, "Oh my God, I love your watch." And he looked at her and said, "Do you want it?" And he literally gave her his watch.
Really?
Like, in that moment. And it wasn't like he was being grandiose or something. He was literal. And she was like, really? What? And he was like, yeah, have it. I mean, that's who he is. Like, he's just this really nurturing, sweet person. I'm very lucky. I married up. My friend Alexandra Billings, who a lot of people know, always says that. And I'm borrowing that from her. Like, I married up. So.
Well, sir, it's been really fun.
I'm so
You've
glad.
Had quite a ride here.
Yeah, I know. Well, you wanted to talk about my life. There it is.
Well, there's a couple other topics. I think I'm going to have you back. We touched on some stuff when we were chatting beforehand. So that'll be another totally different thing. Now.
Jane the Psychic.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, Mel, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wilkinson.